Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we're going to talk about the unlovable monster. So, if you have an unlovable monster, I'm not going to say that everyone in the world does. Um, this is going to look like having narratives that pop up that say, like, I'm not loved, I'm not wanted, I can't have these things, I'm not enough, I'm too big, I'm too small, I'm too much, right? And we're gonna talk through where these things come from, how to bring presence to them, how to not project them off into our relationships with others, and get those needs fulfilled and start opening this line of communication with ourselves. So I'm Alex Pruitt, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. All right, so let's get down into the unlovable monster. Ultimately, this is not necessarily a real unlovable monster. This is something that can live within us. This is a set of stories we've learned to tell ourselves. And over time, we have unconsciously given it an identity. So it's the part of us that feels like an unlovable monster, right? That we have ended up suppressing over time. This can be really aligned with shadow work, is one way to put it. Um, but it really comes from narratives or models we've gotten of how the world works and ways we've learned to very unconsciously repress or suppress ourselves and the expression of what we're feeling so that we can be accepted, loved, wanted enough by the world outside of us. This also comes back to an idea that I've had rattling around for a while. And it's, again, that space of we're trying to build our homes within other people rather than acknowledging the home we already have that exists within ourselves. It doesn't mean that those experiences we had outside of us were not valid or that it wasn't safe for us to act in certain ways in those other relationships because it led to situations where we felt so rejected, so hurt, so unlovable. And it also doesn't mean that those parts of us or that us as a whole, because sometimes those parts can take over, are unlovable at all. It just means that those weren't the right spaces and situations to have that accepted, loved, understood. And where this comes up, there's a lot that comes from society. There's different stigmas that apply to different genders, different races, different sexual orientations that we all sort of get to battle with. And one of the common ones you'll hear me talk about on this channel is men being told that like their their emotions are a weakness, and it's not okay for them to cry, to be sad, to be in a space that's vulnerable where ironically, like through the work I've done, vulnerability is a huge key to being able to be a great leader in relationships and within your own life. So it's a little bit funny how those things that society teaches us are the weakness are actually really huge strengths. And that's what I want to bring it back to in this idea of the unlovable monster is there's some part of you, and it may be one part. It also may be 10 parts, 20 parts, 100 parts that you have taught yourself to reject over time. And those are all valuable pieces of who you are as a whole. And a lot of the time, when these narratives start popping up, when these stories we tell ourselves start popping up and coming forward, and these bigger swells of emotions or feeling immensely hurt because a certain partner isn't able to show us affection or love in the way we're wanting to receive it, we're perpetuating that story and then kind of projecting it onto our partner. I know for me, that was a little bit of a hard truth to swallow. And once I was able to really settle with that and bring it into awareness for myself, it made it so much easier to learn how to work with these parts of myself so that if a relationship ended, if it was not aligned, right? Like if my partner and I wanted two completely different things, then it was easier to not take it personally like it was some deep, horrible fault within myself that, again, was just irreparably, if I can speak, broken or worthless or unvaluable. And I do want to invite anyone who's listening in to stay around till the end because I am going to lead you through a visualization practice that has helped me connect with this part in a very safe way, in an ability to hold that container for myself so I can actually connect with this part of myself or parts of myself because, as I said, I've come across many where I can start creating lines of communication, start diving into what's really there, what I'm really needing underneath, rather than projecting that on all the relationships around me. And I can actually get those needs fulfilled. So, a lot of these concepts come from my personal education and fascination with what's called IFS therapy or internal family systems. And I've also gotten different sources of input from Gestalt therapy um, and other practices that are called aspecting practices. And these are ways of creating new lines of communication within your system, and they can be incredibly powerful. And I want to lead you through one of those so you can start creating this awareness that this identity of you being this unlovable, worthless, invaluable thing, right? Or too much, not enough, whatever that story is for you, is just a story that you picked up somewhere along the line that helps keep you safe in some way. It doesn't make it true all the time or really ever, but it did in that situation where you learned it from. And those stories can get validated over time because in the background, our lovely subconscious mind will bring our focus to the beliefs we have about ourselves. And so you could have exactly what it is you're wanting in a very loving, connected relationship with a partner. Granted, like maybe they don't say thank you as much as you want, but they do say it, right? That line of validation is there. They're willing to have open conversations with you. But one way I tend to catch this for myself is if when I'm coming to conversations, the terms never and always pop up. This is kind of like my little self monitor that goes, "Oh, that's interesting. Let's look at that. Like what was I saying always or never happens?" Because even if you look at statistical data, right? There are some outliers sometimes. There may be a vast majority of the data points that have like gathered in the center mass and make that beautiful bell curve, but there are almost always outliers. So nothing is ever really happening always or never. And I want to bring your awareness to that we can get kind of stuck in these stories. And when we get stuck in these stories, those identities, those parts of ourselves can take over when they're feeling that hurt well up again, when those stories are being reflected again to tell them you are this thing. And again, we can take a step back. We can take a step back to observe what's coming up in our system. I personally had a very elaborate, unlovable monster. Um, I will say that my own like dislike of who I was, self hatred, um, disapproval in myself started at a very young age. The first point in time I can remember saying something very like explicitly negative about myself, where it definitely did not line up with the reality for the people around me. I was in about third grade and it came down to my body image. And in this instance, there was a whole bunch of other kids who I was playing with, and they went to do something, and I stayed behind. And in this instance, this adult came up to me and they're like, "Oh, well, why aren't you off like doing whatever it is the other kids are doing?" And I looked at them just plain as day, like not super angry, no huge emotional tie, and just told them, "Well, I'm too fat." And I was an average sized little girl, like, and even if I did have extra chub on my body at the time, that's also a normal thing that kids go through. And I remember looking at this adult's face and literally their jaw dropped. And they were just in shock that this little, like, third grader would even be saying that about their body, let alone that what they were seeing of me probably didn't line up with the story I was telling. And I can guarantee, like, you probably have instances of this in your life. And there are many things that led to me having that story. But it was a story that carried on for me for a very long time. And when a relationship would end, right, it would come back to like, my body's not attractive enough. It's not a good enough like quality. I'm not valuable enough. There was a lot that I was placing in my value, in my ability to be loved, to receive love from other people that required somebody else having to validate it for me. And so it meant when a relationship would end, all of that would come back as huge waves, huge floods of emotions, because now it's not just whatever that initial story was. It's a story of pain that I've compiled over years, not only within like my memories of different instances where this got validated because I was carrying that story, it also came back to realizing like, or to bringing up all the waves of pain that came along with that, because I was never actually sitting with it. I was never bringing a presence to this very wounded part of myself. And that wounded part of myself would hide away because it thought it could never be loved. And again, when the relationship would end, when I wasn't speaking about those truths where I felt hurt during a relationship, one, I shut myself the fuck down. So I wasn't actually me. I became some morphed version of who I thought my partner wanted me to be. And I would lose myself in the relationship, and ultimately, I'd usually end up transforming into something I didn't even actually like, or it felt like a very hollow shell of who I had been. And then there was that light, that essence, my own personal power that would want to step forward and be like, well, this isn't fun anymore. Like, why am I doing this thing if I'm not having fun in this space? And so for me, I would end up either one, just ending the relationship because it really wasn't working. it wasn't a space I was happy in. Or two, I would start trying to speak up within my relationships, and I would end up being met with the same sort of resistance from a partner that validated, again, those old narratives. And the longer I stayed very oblivious and unconscious to this cycle, for me, the more it perpetuated. So each relationship, it would get a little bit more intense. I would lose myself a little bit more in the relationship than I had the prior one. When that relationship would end, it would hurt that much more. I also ended up exposing myself to a lot of very toxic situations, not only for the way that other people were treating me and I was allowing and leaving myself in that space, but also in the way I was treating myself. So for me, my unlovable monster also tends to go along with my inner critic very highly. And my inner critic is that voice that tells me, um, well, you're not good enough to do that, right? You can't do that. You're just going to fail. And it's ultimately this part of me that doesn't want me to try, because if I try and fail, then I'm going to feel hurt and it's going to perpetuate these stories for those wounded parts underneath. And it its whole job is just trying to protect, and it's doing its job the best way it knows how. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily serving anymore. And to give a little bit of background on these concepts from IFS therapy, um, the idea is that underneath the ways that we interact with the world. So, like, if you have a situation come up and you get really angry, then that anger is a protector. And what it's protecting is something underneath it that is more wounded, that has been hurt, that has taken on this responsibility, again, of being unlovable, being unworthy, not being enough. Um, Again, whatever it is, whatever that hurt feeling is, whatever the fear is that it doesn't want to experience again. And, but it blocks us a lot of the time from being able to recognize it, at least when you haven't trained yourself to bring notice to these parts. Um, Something that keeps popping to mind, and it's come up in a few conversations for me recently as well, is the idea of metacognition. And I was actually trying to search metacognition the other night because I've had prior friends, like a handful of years ago, make comments being like, "Oh, I think you're metacognitive." And I was like, okay, those terms sound familiar, but I don't really know what that means. I personally still feel fuzzy on what that actually means, but to my understanding, it's the concept of thinking about thinking, which I will tell you, like, I have done this for at least the last 6 years very extensively, and to some degree before that. And it can lead to some interesting spirals and rabbit holes of thoughts. But in this, it also allows me to take a step back and just notice my thoughts, sort of like an observer, and not have to identify with them. And this has taken practice. Like, this is not something that I was taught as a young child to do. It was not a skill set my parents had. This is something that came into my reality in the last 6 years. And I'm personally very glad it came into my reality very early on in my journey, because it gave me a different way to be with myself that allowed me to take a step back from the overwhelm of emotions, to take a step back from being just being utterly and irrevocably that unlovable monster, and instead getting to notice it and bring presence to it and get curious about it. And the whole idea behind this is you are a community of all these different parts, all sorts of different identities in the very drastic extreme of this. Uh, we can see it as, oh, what is it called now? So it was multiple personality disorder for a long time, where that is a complete dissociation. Like the main consciousness of the person doesn't know that they have these altered personalities popping out, and they actually like go into blackout states where they have no recognition of what happened when that other consciousness came out. And please forgive me if I'm using terminology that is not in current practice. I know multiple personality no longer is. I don't know if it's considered alters anymore for an alternate personality. I believe now it's considered DID, so dissociative identity disorder, in that it's similar concepts, and that's the dissociative would mean that they're not necessarily fully present in their consciousness. It's like that part of them went to sleep. It wasn't fully aware of what was going on. And while I do not have this diagnosis, as I started exploring parts work, these different aspects of myself, I realized this made so much sense, and DID made so much sense, in the extent that there'd be certain times I'd have certain emotions, certain narratives, certain stories come up in my system. And it was like that would just overtake everything. And at those points, I could even like kind of take a seat back and be watching myself going through this experience, but I didn't know how to pull myself out of it. And that's where working with those parts, again, creating lines of communication, understanding, acceptance, even love, if you can be so valuable. So I mentioned it briefly before. One thing I want you to take notice of, if you are experiencing these feelings of being unwanted, being the lovable monster, is to notice where you're bringing your focus, right? So I am a mother. My child is currently 6.5 years old. And there are definitely like amazing and fun times. There are also times that feel really difficult where he's wanting to be in his power, and it can definitely lead to the situation of it feeling like a power struggle at times. But I want you to bring your focus, if you're having situations like in relationships, in your workspace, where are you focusing? Like if you have this story coming up that's telling you, I'm not enough, like I'm I'm not appreciated, right? I'm not loved, I'm not wanted, any of those sorts of things, are you focusing on that? Because the thing we will tend to do a lot of the time in creating goals for ourselves, whether we're doing that again, consciously or unconsciously, is we'll end up focusing on the thing we don't want to experience. Now, it's great to have an idea of the things you don't want to experience, right? Like, let's say you had been in a very physically abusive relationship, and your partner, like, in this relationship, I'm going to use the example of a male because I primarily had male partners. They got to the point of being physically abusive with you, but ahead of time, you had noticed this tendency of them punching walls. There had been like earlier signs that it could escalate, but you didn't necessarily know it would escalate to the extent of you being physically harmed in this situation. So you may be telling yourself, well, I don't want to experience that level of abuse again. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't recommend anybody to keep leaving themselves in that situation or to feel like they have to stay in an abusive dynamic if it's really not serving you anymore. And like you will end up setting rules for yourself. Well, in the subconscious, when our focus is, I don't want to experience that again, we will end up inadvertently pulling in, attracting, um, noticing those things we don't want to experience. And then it can, one, make the opposite experience. So the thing we actually do want to be experiencing, like one, we may not know how to even identify what that looks like. But two, it could also mean that that is present in our current reality. Maybe it's not coming from that dating relationship. Let's say you don't want to experience abuse, but you want to experience compassion and love. Well, let's say you have incredibly compassionate and loving relationships from your friends and family, but your focus is, I don't want to experience abuse in my partnered relationship. Well, it can prevent you from experiencing that compassion and love in your relationships because you're not focused on it. You're not looking for it. You don't know what that looks like. And that's actually one of my monsters within. This came from a deep guided practice I worked through with another coach a few years ago. I came across this little like chameleon looking girl, like it was half chameleon, half humanoid, and it lived in my stomach or like that region of my body. And there are different things with um, somatics and using your body sort of as a map to what you're experiencing, and again creating these lines of communication where you can actually tap into visual experiences of these different parts. But for me, it was this chameleon girl, and she was living in kind of this like dark, dank, drippy cave, and she was holding something in her little chameleon-y hands. And again, my focus during the practice got drawn to this, and I noticed it was a rope. And I noticed that when she was pulling on this rope, I actually got this slight tugging sensation that would happen at the back of my belly button. And oddly enough, my belly button was one of my body areas that like I hated. If anyone touched it, it would send this weird electric jolt through my system. I actually couldn't even touch it myself, or it would cause the same sort of jolt. Well, in that, I start noticing her pulling on this rope. And so I got curious about what is she trying to pull in? And there's like toys and there's dolls and there's like tools, and it was all these very like materialistic objects and just random things. And the question came up from the coach who was guiding me, asking, well, like what is she trying to pull in? And the answer flooded my system, and it was like, she's looking for love and she doesn't know what that looks like. And then the practice continued, and in that it was like, okay, well, what is it that she needs? And for me at that time in my system, it was a rainbow light. And as soon as I got that answer, a wave of rainbow light flooded in from the top of my head all the way through my body and like through the image. And the cave, the dark dank cave she had been in, turned into a very lush forest. And she had actually transformed into this very spunky little monkey creature. And there was also a hammock that had been woven out of this rainbow light that had come in. And this turned into this vast space that's full of life, that's full of love, that she can now explore and get curious about. And she has that safety net, that her own personal hammock space that she can come back to if she needs to rest, if she needs to recuperate, if she needs to feel safe for some reason. And again, this is just one of my parts. There is no rights or wrongs in what it looks like. And these parts can transform. A lot of the time, we will have an image of them, an idea of them that feels more concerning or distressing than the part actually is at its whole. But it's us coming to it, and not in a way of trying to force it to be something it is not. And we do that through curiosity. But this is playing with yourself. So get deeply curious, because curiosity is a huge part of play. Um, Finding acceptance, just that the part is there and that it doesn't have to be anything else, and that it's okay to be there. The next level to me in this would be understanding. So finding understanding for why it's there, why it believes what it believes, and what it's been through. And that doesn't mean that you have to go back into all the old stories. It just means getting to witness this piece as it is, and understanding that like it has experienced pain, it has experienced discomfort, hurt, fear, whatever that wounded aspect is underneath. And there's the possibility, and if you're open to it, finding love for it. And I do want to say, let that come naturally. Don't force like being like, well, I love you. Because if you don't actually, you're in your own body, you're going to know. So let it come as it does. Let yourself experience those pieces. And where this is profoundly altering to the world around you is you stop placing so much pressure that everybody else needs to value you. So your value is no longer coming from the world outside you. You're always perfectly enough, right? Even if it's too much or too little for somebody else, you are always perfectly enough for you. You are always wanted. If you're wanting yourself, if you are creating these lines of communication with your parts that feel wholly unwanted by the rest of the world, you can create that space of wanting and holding and connection. And it doesn't have to come from anybody outside of you. And then that last piece, again, is love. All other love, for the most part, is going to have somebody else's boundaries, somebody else's limits involved in it. There can be things in that, even in the most open and free forms of love that exist, that feel very conditional, because this is a whole nother person that we're living with, that we're existing with, that we're wanting to interact with. And maybe they don't want us running and clamoring and like pawing all over them, to be like, when we first see them, like maybe that creates a sense of unsafety in their body. And there's a respect and a care that goes into it, but it also means that you may be having to hold back a level of your expression, and then you feel unwanted. And again, you can bring in that love. You can give yourself unconditional love. And the very ironic thing I found through so much of my self-work in these areas is that the more I actually brought myself these spaces, made these connections and lines of communication, and actually started to fulfill my own needs, be the best partner to myself, right? Give myself that unconditional love, like whatever it may be. Allow that little chameleon girl to have that wave of light rush through. The more I was able to do that, and again, create these lines of communication, the more those sorts of situations actually popped up in my relationships and in my connections around me. The more that it also led to the toxic relationships falling away more. I don't know if it made my boundaries better, if there was some energetic shift in the world where those people were just no longer attracted to being around me, but it regardless was easier to have those be an easy no, to take it less personally. And when you're able to do that, you're able to show up to relationships from this place that feels more whole. And then it's not you seeking another partner to build your home in, right? Or to be your exact other half. It's not two people coming together just to be one whole. Like you're not a half a person, you're already a whole person. Even if you never did this work, you are already a completely whole person. At that point, it becomes two whole people coming together who could then adventure in life together, and they can step away from each other, go have their own adventures, and then come back and share about their adventures and share about their journeys and their experiences and be whole together again. That is my ideal of relationship spaces, is one, acknowledging that yes, even in the most broken phases of my life, I have been a whole person. I have not actually needed anyone else, and it can be nice to allow somebody else in to fulfill those needs, but it's never an expectation that they have to. So there's an accountability in learning to hold yourself in those spaces. Also, the more you learn to hold yourself in those spaces and stop rejecting your own parts, the more capable you are of holding someone else and their parts that feel unlovable, unwanted. It doesn't make it your responsibility to hold them. It is still their responsibility to learn those spaces. But you modeling that and bringing that presence can help them get there, because so many of those narratives are created through trauma in relationships, especially when it comes to the emotional wounds, rather than like you were out riding your bike and you fell off your bike and skinned your knee or broke your leg or whatever it may be. Like that's a very physical trauma. There's also emotional and mental trauma that can go along with it. So, in that, I did say I wanted to guide a little bit of a visualization practice. So, I want to invite you to go ahead and find a space that feels safe for you. If you need to come back to this, like if you are currently driving a vehicle, I don't recommend doing this. Like, we're not going into a crazy hypnotic state or anything, but it's about bringing presence to yourself in this moment, allowing yourself to take 10, 15 minutes to just bring this presence to you, to notice what's there and not be distracted by work, by kids, by the TV being on, by other drivers, by your spouse, by whoever it may be. So All right, we're going to start. So I'm going to invite you to sit or lay down. If you lay down and you feel like you're going to sleep, I do recommend just sit up so you can stay more conscious and present during this. There can be some spaces of visualization where even going to tap into that, our bodies can want to fall asleep. Or maybe it's because we're actually giving ourselves time to just be still and rest in that moment and be in that kind of like third eye imaginal space that exists within us. So if you feel sleepy or drowsy at all laying down, then I just invite you to sit up, and I invite you to close your eyes. You will notice I am saying I invite you because every step of this is an invitation. If for some reason you decide, nope, I don't want to do this, then you just stop. You just open your eyes, and that's okay. I do want to express that this is a safe container. Nothing's going to happen to you in this space to cause you immense harm. We are just going in to observe. So you can imagine this kind of like you're behind a glass window almost. Like you don't have to have that barrier there, but if it feels safer to have some sort of protective bubble or barrier around you, you're invited to bring that into this space as well. And just go ahead and take a few deep breaths down into your low belly. So imagine that you can breathe and pull that breath all the way down into like your pelvis, because we're looking at fully expanding the lungs. And then exhale. And a couple more times, these nice deep belly breaths. And just continue to breathe at a pace and rate that feels comfortable for you. And I want you to imagine yourself in a space that's just blank right now. It can be any color for what surrounds you, but it's just a blank slate. Now I want you to see a door forming in front of you. Notice the size of the door. Notice if there's any details around the door frame or on the door itself. Is there any carvings? Is there glass? Is there intricate workings? What is the material that the door is made out of? What's the color of the door? Look and just notice as much detail as you can about the door and about its frame, this threshold. Notice the doorknob. What's the material of the doorknob? Is it crystal? Is it gold? Is it wood? Another form of metal? Again, just taking time to notice the fine detail. Now I want to invite you to go up to the door and just place your fingertips on the handle. And you don't have to open it yet. The invitation is to feel the handle and feel if you want to go in or if you're not ready to, if it's a no for your system. There's no rights or wrongs in this space. Again, it's just noticing what's there for you. If it's a no for you, then I'm going to invite you to go ahead and just open your eyes, and that's okay. I do want to reassure you that the space that you're stepping into is completely safe. And again, we're just going in to observe, to start getting curious about what's here for us in this moment. So if it's a yes to opening the door, then I want to invite you to turn that handle, use the knob, use the lever, whatever it is for the mechanism to open that door, and allow it to open, and you're going to step through the threshold. On the other side of this threshold, there is a vast nature space. And again, no rights or wrongs. This could be a meadow, it could be a forest, it could be a desert, you could be high in the mountains, you could be at the ocean, a lake, you could be in a cave. Like it's what's there for you. The biggest thing again is you are safe in this space, and we're just here to observe. Now look around you. You can pan your head from left to right or right to left, whatever you feel called to, and just notice what this nature space is for you. Can you see the horizon? Is there water? Are there plants, trees? Are there any other forms of life, animals, insects? And again, just notice as much detail as you can about this space you're stepping into. I invite you to take some steps further into this space. And you're going to come across a clearing. And in this clearing, there's 2 seats. This can be chairs, it can be sofas, it could be blankets or pillows on the ground. It could just be 2 nice spots in the grass that look appropriate for sitting. I want to invite you to take a seat in one of the spots. And I want to invite you to, again, look around your space. There's been a little creature here who's been watching you, and you felt their eyes on you the whole time, but you didn't necessarily know what it was. This is your unlovable monster. And it might be in a spot that seems more dark or shadowy, hard to see, and that's okay. It could be hiding behind a tree or a rock. Maybe it's over hiding in water. Again, no rights or wrongs, just what's right for you. But it's curious. It's been watching you since you walked into this space. And if it feels appropriate and like something you want to do, I want you to invite it to come sit with you. And it gets to take this other seat across from you. If it doesn't feel comfortable to take that seat, then just let it know it's invited into the space. Again, if that feels appropriate for you. And without judging, just noticing, just observe it. Observe what you notice about its form, how it moves. Does it come over and sit down with you openly and freely? Is it hesitant? Is it still hiding in the shadows, thinking it still isn't seen, even though it has this invitation? If you need to, you're welcome to let it know that you are here just to meet it, to say hello. And if it doesn't want to come over and sit down with you, that's all right. What I will invite you to do is to drop into this practice probably another 2 to 3 times over the next couple days or even week, so you can build up trust, you can build up safety in this relationship with this part of yourself. Because my guess is that if you have connected with it in the past, you've kind of turned your back on it. So it would make sense that it may not have trust that you're here in this moment. And that's okay too. And if that's the case, again, come back and revisit it. Come back and start building a relationship. If it has decided to sit down with you, then I want you to reflect just on how you feel about this part. Are you disgusted? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you repulsed? What sensations do you notice in your body? Where are those sensations? What do you see when you look at it? Does it have any smells that are associated with it? Tastes? And again, just notice. Now, if it feels safe to do so, I want to invite you to ask this part of yourself for it to tell you about itself, to tell you about its experiences, what it's been through, what is its job, what job has it been trying to do for you, in service to you. Does it like its job? How does it feel about its job? If it doesn't like its job, is there something else it would rather be doing? And if it doesn't have answers for any of these questions right now, that's okay too. Again, you're building a relationship. You're building a connection within yourself. And it may take a little bit for this part of you to trust that it can be seen, that it can be heard, accepted, understood, loved. Now just ask the part if it has anything else that it would like to share with you for today. And if that feels complete, go ahead and thank this part for joining you. Even if it didn't come sit down with you, thank it for showing up in the way it did, to let itself be seen, even in the smallest way. Thank the space around you for being present, for manifesting within you. And you're going to make your way back towards your door and say goodbyes, thank yous, whatever it may be for you. And then step back through the doorway into the plain space where you started. And you're welcome to close the door behind you if you feel that you need to do so. If it feels appropriate, you can also leave it open. Again, it's up to you. It's what feels right for you for where you're at. And there's no rights or wrongs in that. And then invite you to slowly start coming back to yourself. You can sort of like bounce your knees and your shoulders, wiggle your fingers and toes, slowly open your eyes. And then just take a moment. I'm actually going to invite you to take a couple moments after we close out here, because we are just about done with this call today, where you take a few minutes and journal about your experience. If you feel called to going back into that space, like, when are you going to do that next? Set a commitment for yourself for when you do this, for when you go back and check in. How many times do you want to go check in the next week? Journal about how you felt at the start of this, how you felt when you first saw that monster, what you got to experience in that space, and how you feel now stepping out of that space. There can be a lot that comes up for our nervous system, for our body, in allowing ourselves to step into these imaginal third eye spaces that allow us to process on a very deep level where we're interacting with our subconscious. And so just give yourself the space to reflect on that. And I believe that's it. I do want to invite you to pop in what your biggest takeaway was in the comment section. And if you feel like sharing about what your experience was in this practice, then I am happy to celebrate, reflect with you, whatever it is that you're wanting in that. Just in your comment, go ahead and add in, like, I want you to celebrate with me. I want advice. Like, do you have any interpretation of my experience? Whatever that may be. Like, let me know what it is you're wanting to receive from sharing about that experience, and I am happy to engage with each and every one. If you want more personal guidance, if you're noticing like this work is really calling towards you, then I really want to invite you to go ahead, pop down into the description or over to the About section, and under my resources tab, you can book a free discovery call. And we can talk about how you can start integrating this work to bring in that fulfillment, to come home in yourself rather than building all your homes in other people and having that be built on such a shaky foundation. So that you can know that you're wanted, so you can know you're loved, so you can know that you're enough, so you can know you're valuable, that you're worthy in every way. So until next time, thank you so much for joining me, and have a fantastic week, everyone.